Imagine walking into your local grocery store tomorrow morning. You grab bread, milk, eggs, normal Tuesday. You get to the register, pull out a $20 bill, and the cashier looks at you like you just handed them Monopoly money. They shake their head. Sorry, we don't take those anymore. It sounds insane, right? Like something that only happens in collapsed states like Venezuela or Zimbabwe. But here's the terrifying truth. That piece of paper in your wallet only has value because of a secret deal, made in a dark room 50 years ago. A handshake between America and Saudi Arabia that turned oil into the oxygen of the dollar. For half a century, the United States has lived in an economic fairy tale, printing infinite money to buy real goods, because the world was forced to use our currency to buy energy. But that engine is sputtering. The handshake is breaking, and the timeline for change isn't measured in decades anymore. It's measured in years. Before we dive into the greatest financial trick ever pulled and what happens when it ends, hit that subscribe button and join the Wealth Forum. We break down the real economics behind the headlines that shape your financial future. Today, we're exposing the slow, painful death of the petrodollar and what it means for every dollar you own. To understand how this system dies, we have to understand how it was born. And it didn't begin in a New York boardroom or a congressional hearing. It began on a humid morning in July 1974, in the coastal city of Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Let's set the scene because America at this moment was absolutely wrecked. The year is 1974, President Nixon is about to resign in disgrace over Watergate. But the real crisis isn't political, it's economic. 3 years earlier, Nixon had shocked the world by closing the gold window. Until that point, every US dollar was a claim check for actual gold sitting in Fort Knox, but America had printed too. Many claimed checks to pay for Vietnam and welfare programs. Foreign nations, led by the French, started demanding their gold. Nixon didn't have it, so he defaulted. He told the world, sorry, your dollars are now just paper. The dollar crashed. Inflation tore through American suburbs. And then, just to kick us while we were down, Arab nations launched the 1973 oil embargo. They turned off the taps to punish the West for supporting Israel. Gas prices quadrupled overnight. People waited 6 hours in lines just to fill their tanks. Americans were literally shooting each other at gas stations. The stock market lost 45% of its value. The dollar was dying. Enter William Simon, Treasury Secretary and former bond trader, a shark who understood one thing better than anyone: debt. In July 1974, Nixon sent Simon on a secret mission to Saudi Arabia. His orders were blunt and terrifying. Do not come back empty-handed. Failure means the Soviet Union wins the Cold War and the American economy implodes. Simon sat down with the Saudi royal family and made them an offer, straight out of a mafia movie. The deal was simple but revolutionary. Part 1. America would guarantee the survival of the House of Saud. We'd sell them the most advanced weapons on Earth, fighters jets, tanks, missiles. We'd be their bodyguard in a very dangerous neighborhood. If anyone, Iran, Iraq, the Soviets, looked at them wrong, Uncle Sam would step in. Part 2. In exchange, Saudi Arabia had to do 2 things. First, use their dominant position in OPEC to ensure every single drop of oil sold anywhere in the world was priced in US dollars only, not German marks, not Japanese yen, not gold, only dollars. This meant if France wanted oil, they first had to buy US dollars. If Japan wanted energy, they had to buy US dollars. Permanent artificial demand for the dollar that would never go away. But here's the genius stroke. The Saudis would make trillions selling oil. What would they do with all that cash? Part 3. Recycling. Simon convinced them to take those billions of petrodollars and immediately invest them back into the United States, specifically US Treasury bonds. They would use their oil profits to fund America's national debt. Think about the elegance of this scheme. We print paper dollars to buy their oil. They take those paper dollars and lend them back to us so we can buy more oil. A perpetual motion machine of wealth extraction. America got oil for free. The rest of the world paid for it through inflation. But the Saudis had one condition. The deal had to be invisible. If the Arab world found out they were funding Israel's biggest ally, King Faisal might wake up with a knife in his back. So William Simon did something unprecedented. He rigged the US debt auctions. He created a special system strictly for the Saudi central bank, allowing them to buy billions in US debt secretly. No paper trail, no public records. For 40 years, this was hidden from the American public. It wasn't until 2016, after a Freedom of Information Act request, that the Treasury finally admitted the scale. This handshake in Jeddah was the birth of the petrodollar. It stabilized the dollar. It funded our military expansion. It allowed Americans to consume far more than we produced for 5 decades. But moats dry up, and alliances crumble. Let's explain how this machine actually conquered the world. I want you to imagine you're the finance minister of a developing nation. Let's call it the Republic of Hard Work. It's 1985. Your country is industrializing. You have factories, ambitious people, resources. But you have one massive problem. You don't have oil. Without oil, your factories stop. Your trucks stop. The lights go out. You call up Saudi Arabia and say, "I'd like to buy 1 million barrels of oil, please." You offer to pay in your local currency. The line goes dead. They laugh. Why? Because nobody wants your currency. They can't spend it. They tell you, "Come back when you have US dollars." This is the trap. To keep your country alive, you now have to find US dollars. But you can't print them. Only the Federal Reserve can. So how do you get them? You work for them. You force your citizens to wake up at 5 a.m., go to factories, and make t-shirts and electronics. You put those real goods, which cost sweat and resources to create, on a boat. You send them to the United States. America receives your goods. In exchange, they send you green paper, digital digits on a screen. Your country gave up real wealth, labor, time, resources. The US gave up nothing. The cost to print a $100 bill is 14 cents. But you take that paper because you have no choice. You send it to Saudi Arabia for oil. What does Saudi Arabia do? They don't hide it. They invest it in US Treasury bonds. They lend that money back to the US government. This is the Petrodollar recycling loop, the economic equivalent of a cheat code. In the 1960s, the French finance minister called this America's exorbitant privilege. He was furious. While France had to export real cars and wine to pay for imports, the United States could simply write a check. If the check bounced, we'd print more money, because every nation needed oil, every nation needed dollars. This created bottomless artificial demand for US currency. It meant America could run massive deficits that would bankrupt any other nation. We could fund welfare and warfare simultaneously. But there was a dark side. Because the world was desperate for dollars, the dollar stayed artificially high. A strong dollar sounds great. Cheap vacations, cheap electronics. But for American manufacturers, it was a death sentence. It made American goods expensive for the world. It made it impossible for a factory in Ohio to compete with China. The petrodollar demanded that we transition from making stuff to making debt. We hollowed out the Rust Belt. We closed steel mills. We exported our industrial base and replaced it with banks and hedge funds. We traded independence for cheap imports and cheap borrowing. And for decades, the world played along. Why? Because the system was stable. The US Navy patrolled shipping lanes. There was no alternative. The dollar was the only game in town. Even America's enemies had to use it. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union sold oil in dollars. North Korea, Iran, Venezuela. When they sell globally, the pricing is in dollars. It's insidious. You cannot escape it. This turned the US Treasury bond into the global piggy bank. When China makes profit, they buy treasuries. When Japan profits, they buy treasuries. But this relies on one crucial pillar: trust. Trust that the US will pay its debts. Trust that the dollar will hold value. Most importantly, trust that the US won't weaponize the system. For 40 years, that trust held. The dollar was like plumbing. The water company doesn't shut off your water because they don't like your politics. But then we started messing with the plumbing. We started deciding who drinks and who dies of thirst. Let's talk about the moment the cracks became craters. February 2022, Vladimir. Putin announces the special military operation in Ukraine. Russian tanks roll across the border. The Western response was immediate and nuclear. Not physically, financially. The US, UK, and EU did something never done to a G20 economy before. First, they kicked major Russian banks out of SWIFT. Think of SWIFT as the WhatsApp for global banks. It's how a bank in New York tells a bank in Moscow, "I'm sending you $10 million. Get kicked out and you're financially blind and mute. You can't send or receive money." But then the West did something even more extreme. They froze the reserves of Russia's central bank. Russia had $630 billion in foreign reserves, money they earned selling oil and gas. Over a weekend, the US and allies froze roughly $300 billion. Just like that, poof, gone. The narrative in the West was triumphant. We crushed the ruble, the economy will collapse. Initially, the ruble did crash to 140 to the dollar. Biden bragged the ruble was rubble, but then the smoke cleared. The West realized they'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. By weaponizing the dollar so aggressively, they broke the cardinal rule: neutrality. Think about it. If you deposit money in a bank, you expect to withdraw it even if the manager hates you. If the manager can seize your savings because he disagrees with your politics, you find a new bank. The message to the world was chilling. Your dollars aren't your money. They're permission slips from the US government. Those permissions can be revoked anytime. China looked at this and thought, we have 3 trillion in reserves. If we invade Taiwan, they take it all. Saudi Arabia thought, if we disagree with policy, our money is gone. Instead of collapsing, Russia pivoted. On March 23, 2022, Putin announced unfriendly countries would pay for Russian gas in rubles. Europe was outraged. They said breach of contract. Putin said, you stole our dollars. Dollars are worthless to us. Use rubles or freeze. Europe folded. They needed the gas. The ruble didn't just recover. It became the best performing currency against the dollar that year. But the bigger story is what happened behind the scenes. Russia built a parallel system. They ramped up SPFS, their SWIFT alternative. They connected it to China's CIPS system. Russian oil started flowing to India and China in record volumes. But it wasn't sold in dollars. It was sold in rupees, yuan, and dirhams. A shadow fleet emerged, hundreds of aging ships with obscure ownership carrying Russian oil to the world. The US tried to impose a $60 price cap. The market laughed. Russia sold for whatever buyers would pay. India doesn't care about Donbas. India cares about cheap energy for 1.4 billion people. This was the turning point. The sanctions failed to stop the war, but succeeded in destroying the myth of dollar indispensability. Before 2022, trading oil without dollars was fringe theory. After 2022, it became survival strategy. Trade between Russia and China hit $240 billion in 2023, with almost none settled in dollars. The US fired the financial nuke. Russia survived. This revealed a terrifying truth. The world needs commodities more than it needs dollars. You can print dollars. You can't print oil. You can't print wheat. You can't print nickel. Russia has stuff. America has paper. In war of attrition, stuff wins. And leading this charge is China. China is the world's largest oil importer. For years, they had to pay in US dollars. Think about the absurdity from Beijing's perspective. China is America's biggest rival. Yet to keep lights on, they use their rival's currency. Every oil purchase clears through US banks, giving Washington a map of China's energy flows and power to freeze them. Xi Jinping decided this was a chokehold he could no longer tolerate. In March 2018, China launched the Shanghai International Energy Exchange, the world's first yuan-denominated oil futures. And to solve the trust issue, they added a brilliant feature. They linked it to gold. Here's how it works. You're an oil producer. You sell to China. China pays you in yuan. You're worried the yuan might devalue or get trapped. So you immediately use that yuan to buy physical gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. You load the gold on a plane and fly it back to your vault. China effectively recreated a gold standard for trade. Yuan acts as temporary middleman for seconds. Producers love this. Gold has no counterparty risk. Can't be frozen by US Treasury. Can't be printed by the Fed. This bypasses the dollar, US banks, and SWIFT entirely. Western analysts laughed in 2018. They said volume would be tiny. They were wrong. Volume exploded. It's now the third largest oil market globally. But China isn't just building alternatives. They're actively courting the Saudis, telling them, Americans lecture you about human rights, block weapons sales, devalue your money. We just want business. We'll pay in gold. And the Saudis are listening. In December 2022, Xi Jinping visited Riyadh. The welcome was fit for an emperor. Fighter jet flyovers. 3-day summit. While Biden got a fist bump in a hallway, Xi got a royal procession. During that summit, Xi called for China and Gulf nations to settle oil trades in yuan. A few weeks later, in January 2023, the Saudi finance minister dropped the bomb. He told reporters at Davos, there are no issues discussing how we settle trade, whether dollars, euros, or Saudi riyals. Read that again. For 49 years, the answer was dollars only. Now it's, we're open to suggestions. This is the sound of monopoly breaking. The alliance has expired. The exclusive marriage is over. Saudi Arabia adopted a policy of Saudi first. If the world doesn't need dollars to buy Saudi oil, they don't need to hold trillions in US Treasury bonds. And if they stop buying our debt, who does? The Federal Reserve, which means more printing, which means the inflation you feel at grocery stores isn't temporary. It's the new baseline. So what actually happens when the petrodollar dies? Let's walk through the nightmare scenario step by step. First, the dollar loses reserve currency status gradually, not overnight, but country by country, transaction by transaction. The world stops needing dollars. China and Saudi Arabia trade oil in yuan gold. Russia and India trade in rupees. Brazil and Argentina use local currencies. Each defection is small, but they add up. Second, demand for US Treasury bonds collapses. For 50 years, foreigners bought our debt to recycle their dollars. If they don't have excess dollars anymore, They don't need treasuries. Our national debt is $35 trillion. We're spending more on interest payments than on defense. If foreigners stop buying and the Fed has to monetize all that debt by printing, inflation goes vertical. Third, the dollars trapped overseas come flooding home. This is the reflux. For decades, we exported dollars to buy stuff. Trillions sit in foreign vaults. If those nations decide they don't want dollars, where do they go? They come back to America to buy American assets. Foreign entities buy farmland, real estate, stocks, machinery. Suddenly, trillions of new dollars chase the same goods. Textbook hyperinflation. Fourth, your standard of living collapses. Americans are used to consuming more than we produce because the world subsidized us. We run trade deficits, import cheap goods. If the dollar loses value, imports become unaffordable. That cheap shirt from Vietnam? Now $50. That iPhone? $5,000. Gas? $15 per gallon. We'd be forced to live within our means for the first time in a century. And living within our means will feel like poverty. Fifth, the military empire becomes unaffordable. The US spends $850 billion annually on defense. We maintain 750 bases in over 70 nations, 11 carrier groups. We haven't paid for this with taxes. We paid with debt. We swipe the national credit card and let the world subsidize it. When the subsidy ends, we can't afford the empire. We'll have to choose. Welfare state or warfare state? We can't have both. Bases close. Fleets come home. We stop being world police. When the US Navy stops patrolling, piracy returns. Regional warlords control shipping. Insurance rates skyrocket. Everything you import gets more expensive. Sixth, we enter a multipolar currency world. No single king of money. The dollar doesn't vanish, but shrinks to regional power. 3 economic blocks emerge. The dollar bloc, the euro bloc, the BRICS bloc controlling massive energy and resources. This is economic balkanization. Global trade becomes fragmented, expensive, and inefficient. Companies can't source from cheapest provider. They source from friendliest. Friendshoring. This is massively inflationary. An American worker costs 10 times a Chinese worker. You, the consumer, pay the geopolitical tax. Seventh, the return of barter. When you can't trust currency, trade looks like barter. Pakistan traded oranges for Russian oil. Iran and Sri Lanka did tea for oil. I'll give you LNG if you build me a railway. Raw brute force economy, where real assets matter more than derivatives. Russia has energy. China has manufacturing. Brazil has food. What does the US have? Software, universities, financial markets. But you can't eat software. Can't heat homes with derivatives. So what do you actually do? You're not a central banker. You can't stop the petrodollar from dying. You can't stop debt from exploding. But you can build an arc. First, stop measuring wealth in dollars. Start measuring in purchasing power. Can this asset buy more eggs, fuel, land in 10 years than today? That's real wealth. Second, the 60-40 portfolio is dead. Bonds are guaranteed losses when government inflates to pay debt. Pivot from paper to hard assets. Third, get insurance. Gold and silver. 5 to 15% of net worth. Physical, not paper ETFs. If you can't touch it, you don't own it. Silver is volatile but has industrial utility. Good for barter in crisis. Fourth, consider Bitcoin. Not for gambling, as insurance. Only asset with fixed supply. 21 million ever. No politician can print more. It's digital, portable, unseizable if you hold your keys. Even if skeptical, 1 to 5% is rational bet against dollar system. Fifth, productive real assets. Cash-flowing rental properties, farmland, timberland, companies with pricing power that can raise prices when costs go up. Energy companies, consumer staples, commodities producers, defense contractors. Sixth, debt is a weapon. Fixed-rate debt like 30-year mortgage at 3%. Keep it. You're paying back with cheaper dollars. Bank effectively pays you to live there. But variable rate debt, credit cards, adjustable mortgages, suicide. Pay off immediately. Seventh, the ultimate asset is you. Your ability to produce value. If dollar collapses, guy with million in bank is poor. Guy who knows how to fix generator, grow food, code in Python is rich. Invest in skills, health, network of trusted people. Community is ultimate safety net. The petrodollar system gave America 50 years of unparalleled prosperity. It allowed us to win Cold War, build middle class. But nothing lasts forever. The mechanism is broken. World is moving on. You can mourn the old world or position for the new one. Transition will be volatile, messy, winners and losers. Losers hold bags of paper promises. Winners hold hard assets, real skills, independent minds. The slow death of the petrodollar isn't the end of the story. It's just turning the page. Make sure you're the one writing your next chapter. If this deep dive opened your eyes to what's really happening, smash that like button, subscribe to the Wealth Forum, and turn on notifications, because we'll keep breaking down the real mechanics of the global economy while everyone else is distracted. I want to hear from you. Are you preparing for the post-dollar world? Do you think the UN takes over, or are we heading for gold standard? Are you buying hard assets or staying in paper? Drop your strategy in the comments. Let's figure this out together. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay skeptical, and remember, economics isn't just about money, it's about your life.